And I find the connection between this particular line, only by hard sacrifice is high heaven earned, with the ideal that we have of yajna, the sacrifice, which in the Indian tradition has been considered as the foundational law of entire existence. So there is a cosmic sacrifice that is the basis of the entire, and Sri Aurobindo talks of it as the involutionary and evolutionary sacrifice. And from that context, how it connects to the idea of surrender, the inner sacrifice, the inner surrender that is so emphasized in integral yoga. So Veda, as we know, is coming from a time which had a very intuitive and symbolic mentality. So the language of the Veda had sort of a double meaning. So the outer yajna, the outer sacrifice was the outer action, but the psychological, spiritual meaning of the yajna is what we are concerned with today. So Sri Aurobindo, in fact, speaks of Veda as a very ancient psychological science and art of spiritual living. And so the entire existence is infused with, as if every particle of existence is a portion, carries in its seed, in some seed form, the portion of this divine, this supreme. And that is what the true meaning of sacrifice of the divine is, the self-offering of the divine, or what we understand in the Vedic terminology as the Vedic hymn of the Purusha Sutta.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Yes Talks. Today's session is titled Vedic Yajña, a mutual debt binds man to the Supreme. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Beloo Mehra. Dr. Beloo is currently serving as Director of BhāratShakti, an institute of Sri Aurobindo Society, dedicated to research and program development in areas related to Indian culture. A former professor at an American university, she has more than 2 decades of experience in teaching, curriculum development, researching, and guiding research scholars. She has been working in the field of Sri Aurobindo Studies for more than 15 years. She writes for several publications and speaks regularly at various platforms on topics related to integral education, Indian culture, social cultural evolution, and integral yoga. And her recent books include Antar Yatra, Soul Journeys, Understanding Contemporary India in the Light of Sri Aurobindo, The Spiritual Foundations of Indian Culture, and Indian Literary Tradition in the Light of Sri Aurobindo. Welcome, Beloo ma'am. Thank you so much for joining. We are so glad to have you back for yet another interesting session. Looking forward to the talk, ma'am. Over to you.
Namaste. Thank you. Am I audible clearly?
Yes, yeah.
I seem to have some internet issues today, but as long as it's audible, that's fine. Well, first of all, thank you so much. Very good to see you, and very good to see Ramesh Bhaiya also. Thank you for giving me another opportunity to be on this very important platform and the important work that to a minute. Is this okay? Am I online?
Yeah, just now.
Okay, sorry about that. It just, I think, started giving problem, because I think there is a deeper reason why nature is doing this. The topic today is on sacrifice, the mutual debt. So in some ways, every preference, we think we have set things up, and then again, there is a moment you have to sacrifice, let go of your preference. So I was just saying that I'm grateful to be a part of this Yes platform once more. And I'll straight jump into the topic because it's a pretty big topic, and I'll try to kind of simplify and compress it within our time today. So I want to start off with one line from Savitri, which comes in the context of when Narad Muni is telling Savitri's parents about what is ahead of Savitri. And he says this one line. And again, I have to just give a very brief context. In this passage, Sri Aurobindo is actually describing the sacrifice of God's messenger, of particularly the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, where he says this line, only by hard sacrifice is high heaven earned. He must face the fight, the pang who would conquer hell. One who wants to conquer hell, who wants to do the work of transformation or conquering all that is inconscient in the existence, must make a very hard sacrifice, because only then the high heaven can be earned. And when I read this, and I've been kind of revisiting this book of fate for the last few weeks for various different reasons to understand certain things. And I find the connection between this particular line, only by hard sacrifice is high heaven earned, with the ideal that we have of yajna, the sacrifice, which in the Indian tradition has been considered as the foundational law of entire existence. So there is a cosmic sacrifice that is the basis of the entire, and Sri Aurobindo talks of it as the involutionary and evolutionary sacrifice. And from that context, how it connects to the idea of surrender, the inner sacrifice, the inner surrender that is so emphasized in integral yoga. So that's what the theme that I will be exploring today in the context of my presentation. So I'm going to quickly start with some of the slides that I have. I hope it's visible.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, and I want to take us back to the yajna that we find in the Veda as the foundation of this cosmic existence that Sri Aurobindo speaks of, which later also gets emphasized again in Bhagavad Gita, which again, as we know, is the synthesis of the Vedantic, the Upanishadic knowledge. So Veda, as we know, is coming from a time which had a very intuitive and symbolic mentality. So the language of the Veda had sort of a double meaning. So the outer yajna, the outer sacrifice, was the outer action, but the inner, the psychological, spiritual meaning of the yajna is what we are concerned with today. So Sri Aurobindo, in fact, speaks of Veda as a very ancient psychological science and art of spiritual living. And most of our participants here are familiar with the deep psychological spiritual interpretation with which Sri Aurobindo has looked at Veda, because it comes from his own inner realization. So I'll just go very quickly in terms of the core Vedic teaching.
The connection has got
Is the
stuck.
Sadanamritasya, the house of higher truth. And that truth, the journey or the aim of the Vedic Rishi has been to go from this lower truth to the world of the higher truth. The lower hemisphere, the lower upper ardha to the parardha, the higher hemisphere. And in between these two worlds, the Vedic Rishi also had this glimpse of the link world, which Sri Aurobindo speaks of as the Satyam Rihat Brihat. That's the Vijnanamaya link in the Upanishadic language. And this is where Satyam Ritam Brihat is the truth, right, and vast. That is the plane of truth consciousness, the Rit Chit that we have. And the purpose, the aim, the work that the Vedic Rishi is doing is trying to find that path, Ritasya Pantha, the path of the truth, the path of the gods through which he will climb to this state of illimitable mortality, which is the higher, the Sadanam Ritasya, the house of the higher truth. And this particular climb or fight, it's also been spoken of as a battle, as a pilgrimage, as a journey that the Vedic Rishi is on. The instrument for that, the effort that the Rishi is putting in is called Yajna. And Agni is the pathfinder, the leader through which the aspiration of the Rishi is being taken over to the gods, conveyed to the gods. So this idea of mutual sacrifice starts from right there, which is that the Rishi or the one who is performing the yajna, outwardly as well as inwardly, is the one who is sacrificing something in this fire of aspiration. And it's a journey of ascent. It's an ascending journey from a lower consciousness to a higher consciousness, towards the consciousness of the gods. And in return, the gods are sacrificing themselves so that they can be born in the consciousness that is aspiring. So there is the descent or the formation of the godly nature, the godliness in human nature that is happening, and there is an ascending movement of the human consciousness towards the consciousness of the gods. And Sri Aurobindo at one point speaks of that Agni, the link that takes this aspiration higher towards the gods, he calls of it as Brahman word energy, the energy that is going towards Brahman. Now, I know to get a full picture, we should also spend some time talking about the significance of the psychological interpretation of the gods, various Vedic gods that Sri Aurobindo has spoken of, Agni, Indra, Soma, Varuna, Mitra, all kinds of gods that we know as Vedic gods. But in the interest of time, I won't go there. Maybe we'll just spend some time on few of the symbolic interpretation that Sri Aurobindo has given to get us a sense of, bring it closer to the inner yajna of the integral yoga. Now, in the outer ritual, the outer Vedic yajna that the Rishi is doing, typically there are three key offerings that are made in this sacrifice. One is the ghee, the grihatam. And what is this ghee? The clarified butter, as we know. Now, go in the Vedic symbolism that Sri Aurobindo gives is go represents or go symbolizes light, a ray of light. So anything that comes from the cow, go, represents something to do with light, something to do with illumination. So that ghee or grihatam is the clarified mind, the illumination that comes in mind. So that is one of the offerings that we put in the outer yajna, the outer fire sacrifice. The second common offering is the offering of the horse, Ashwa. Ashwa, the symbolism of Ashwa, according to Sri Aurobindo, is the energy, the vital, the nervous energy, the will to act, the will and action. So the force with which we act on something. So that's the vital part in us. So look at how interesting this symbolism is. The ghee, the clarified butter, represents the mind. The horse, the ashwa, represents the vital. And then we have another common offering that is done in the fire ritual is of Soma. Soma represents the delight of existence. Soma in ordinary understanding is a wine, but that is the delight. It makes sense that wine would give a delight in that sense. So that's the heart, the emotional part in us. So that's the enjoyment, the feeling or emotional or love, all kinds of feelings that we have. So these are the three main offerings that a yajmana puts in the fire ritual with the intention of two key fruits that the yajmana seeks from the gods. One is, again, this is a very outwardly, this is how it would be seen as. In the Vedic mantras, we see this, the rishi is asking wealth of cows and wealth of horses. Seen from the outside, it seems like a very materialistic gain. But the deeper spiritual symbolism that Sri Aurobindo gives to these two fruits, that phalam that the rishi is seeking or the yajmana is seeking, is mental illumination and a purified, transformed abundance of vital energy, the will. Now it's very interesting because Agni, Sri Aurobindo reminds in great detail. He does a very, there's a whole chapter on Agni in Secret of the Veda where he speaks of the double aspect of Agni. That Agni is a synthesis of both force and light. So light, that is the wealth of cows, the mental illumination, and the wealth of horses, the will, the force with which we will convert the light into implementable action. So this way, the idea is that the sacrifice, the fire ritual, the yajna that the rishi is performing, that the yajman is performing, is not done in any sort of a spirit of asceticism, but rather seeking certain fruits which will help illumine, purify, and transform. That is a very important aspect. So the gods are sacrificing, gods are descending to give the rishi this kind of wealth, the mental illumination and the transformed, purified, vital energy. So there is a mutuality that is happening in this yagna. Now, Sri Aurobindo takes this even further and speaks of, we know this, that in the Rig Veda, we have in the 10th mandala, the very important sukta, Purusha Sukta, the sacrifice of the cosmic Purusha, where the idea of starting of creation is explained, how the cosmic Purusha sacrifices and becomes the entire existence from the transcendent state to the universal cosmic state, causal, subtle, and gross. And Sri Aurobindo speaks of the Purusha Sukta as a constant involutionary sacrifice that the divine is doing. This is divine's self-offering so that creation can begin and creation can sustain. And this is a continuous process by which this indivisible spirit involves itself, and that's where the term involution comes in, into something that is entirely opposite of that, which is there is an indivisible unity at the level of the spirit, but as it descends, as it voluntarily keeps limiting itself, it descends and involves and sacrifices and offers itself into becoming something entirely opposite of that, which is the fragmentation of matter. So it is from one, it's a journey from one to the many. That is how Sri Aurobindo looks at the sacrifice of the cosmic Purusha. But he also makes it very clear, actually, when we read Savitri and also his book, The Mother, that essentially it is a holocaust of the Prakriti, holocaust of the mother, sacrifice of the mother that is happening. So the Purusha sort of delegates this work of sacrifice or starting or involving itself, dispersing itself in each and every atom of the matter to the mother, to the divine mother. And there are beautiful lines we find in Savitri to describe this sacrifice of the mother. I'll just going to read these lines. Our life is a holocaust of the Supreme. These are exactly about the Purusha Sutta of the Rig Veda. Our life is a holocaust of the Supreme. The great world mother by her sacrifice has made her soul the body of our state, accepting sorrow and unconsciousness. Divinity's lapse from its own splendors wove the many patterned ground of all we are. So the entire existence is infused with, as if every particle of existence is a portion, carries in its seed, in some seed form, the portion of this divine, this supreme. And that is what the true meaning of sacrifice of the divine is, the self-offering of the divine, or what we understand in the Vedic terminology as the Vedic hymn of the Purusha Sutta. In the same 10th mandala, there is also another sutta which talks about this idea of sacrifice of the mother. And Nalinikant Gupta had done a beautiful translation and a telling of that story. And he titled it The Bride of the Brahman, where the mother, who is the bride of the Brahman, bride of the Supreme, comes down, and people, the other gods are asked to find her where she has gone lost. And the gods who are sent, the search parties put together, and the gods who are leading the search is Varuna. Why Varuna? Because Varuna symbolizes the vast consciousness, the vastness that we seek. So other gods come, and eventually they find the bride of Brahman hiding in dark matter, again symbolizing the point that it's the mother who has gone into the matter. Why? Because she, only with this touch of the divine mother, there is a possibility that is there in matter for transformation. In matter, life will come. In life, mind will come. So this possibility to, as if to sow the seed of the possibility of uniting back with the indivisible spirit. So one has become many, which is the involutionary sacrifice. And then the evolutionary sacrifice has to start on the other end. So that's the full story that Sri Aurobindo gives of the Yajna, the Vedic Yajna. So one is the self-offering of the divine. The divine has offered itself completely in every particle of existence, leaving aside the indivisible unity, the indivisible, it has veiled that indivisible, that Unitarian consciousness, and it has gone into the fragmentation by limiting itself and using the mechanism of ego. That's the involutionary sacrifice. Evolution is when matter, life, mind starts to rediscover that unity back to the spirit. Because when the division sort of from one to many happens, it is only at the outer level that the unity is lost. At the deepest level, at the level of the Purusha, the unity is retained. And Sri Aurobindo speaks of that as that at the causal level, you have the prajna. In the form of prajna, it stays. At the level of the subtle level, it stays in the form of Hiranyagarbha. And also at the level of the gross existence, the gross matter, we have the consciousness of the Virat, the one who is spread everywhere. So that at the deepest level, that unity is retained. Because it is retained, there is a possibility of rediscovery of that unity of the spirit. How? By reversing the mechanism. There was a self-limitation that was happening in the evolutionary journey. In the evolutionary sacrifice, there has to be an expansion of consciousness. So, in simpler terms, it is about a denial of ego, which is where the idea of the sacrifice comes in. But as we'll see a little later, Mother preferred the word surrender or self-giving rather than sacrifice. Why? Because so many kinds of meaning have been attached, and the modern mind, the rational mind, finds it a little difficult to accept the word sacrifice. and it carries the connotation that you're giving up something that you would rather not. So she preferred the word surrender or self-giving. So the essential nature of this evolutionary sacrifice, which is where it connects to the idea of yoga or sadhana or tapasya, is that we constantly deny the ego's insistence and consciously go through an act of self-giving to higher consciousness. Invite those powers, invite those gods of vastness, of harmony, which is the Mitra, Varuna Mitra. Invite the gods of Indra, the illumined mind, all those within us to be born within us. So this is where I wanted to kind of just put this picture into maybe most of the people here are familiar with. This is a picture from one of the dawn fires that we have at Auroville, which is, I see it as a very new form of the ancient Vedic Yajña, a collective Yajña that is happening on several days during the year, during darshan times. 1st January also, there is an early morning dawn fire that happens just in the amphitheater of Matri Mandir, and so many people gather around with the idea of kindling the aspiration within and offering themselves to the higher consciousness. So the idea of Agni, which in the Veda is described as the immortal part in the mortal being, the one which aspires, the seat of aspiration. In integral yoga, we speak of it as psychic being. So the nature of this Agni is that there is a perfect synthesis of force and light. Force is the divine will to take action. When it is illumined by divine wisdom. So the seer will, the rishi's will, which not only has wisdom, the seeing of the wisdom that comes from seeing, but also has the will to translate that into action. So when Sri Aurobindo and Mother speak of aspiration, rejection, and surrender, aspiration is the lighting or kindling of the fire within. So that's how we begin to see the connection between integral yoga and the Vedic Yajna. Now, in integral yoga, since even the Vedic Yajna, Sri Aurobindo speaks of it as from a spiritual, symbolic perspective, in integral yoga, the entire outer act actually becomes an inner sacrifice, an inner surrender, an inner yagna, an inner process of complete self-giving, complete self-offering to the Divine Mother, and taking only Mother as the sole support, guide, and refuge. That's what we find again and again in Sri Aurobindo's writings, particularly after the 1926 Siddhi, which we will be soon sort of commemorating at 24th November. The anniversary of that will be coming. And in the book that came out after that Siddhi experience, the book titled The Mother, he speaks very clearly about that all should go through the embodied mother. Even if you are aspiring to, your temperament is more towards an impersonal form of the divine, it is through this embodied mother who has brought that, who has come down from that transcendent cosmic plane to enable the work of transformation. It is through her, to her, that we turn toward for all guidance, for all support, for entire refuge. So this inner yagna in integral yoga is about complete surrender, complete offering of the self in all parts of the being. Even the Vedic Yajna was about that, the 3 offerings that I mentioned briefly. So here we offer all our being to the Divine Mother, and the other side of the sacrifice is the divine Shakti that is pouring, the force of the mother that is pouring from her consciousness, we constantly open ourselves to that descending Shakti, to that descending force. So that two-way process of the yajna is what we understand as sacrifice or surrender in integral yoga. Now, as I was saying, just few more points, that this, why mother preferred the word surrender rather than sacrifice is because sacrifice has some sort of a sense of suppression of the being, or you are trying to give something in a forced sort of way. But this cannot be a self-giving. This cannot be in the nature of giving oneself for purification. So it cannot be some sort of a suppression of the being. It has to be a very spontaneous and joyous movement of self-giving, which is only possible when there is complete trust and sincerity and faith in divine. So that's why when we talk of all those 12 qualities or soul values, sincerity comes so at the at the very first, that without sincere, complete, spontaneous, joyous movement of self-giving, there is no progress possible on this path of integral yoga. Now, again, the mutuality also comes up in the fact of what are we giving and what are we seeking from this self-giving. So, and there is also, this also helps us understand why it need not be a forced giving, because what we are asked to give is, now here comes the word rejection. First is the aspiration, the rejection. What are we giving up? What are we rejecting? All that is part of the lower nature. So Sri Aurobindo very clearly explains the lower nature and the higher nature, the prakriti that comes in, at the relative level in two ways. So it's the giving up of a lower nature, everything that takes us away from walking the path towards the divine nature, whether it is pride, jealousy, vanity, insincerity, anger, all the Shadharipus, tamas of the mind, tamas of the body, preferences, prejudices, biases, all that we have in all parts of our being. We need to give that up. We need to reject that. That's the giving that the aspirant offers in the yajna, in the inner fire of aspiration. And the divine force that is descending, the one to which we open ourselves, to which the aspirant open himself or herself, is the higher nature, the transformed nature, the transformation of each part of the being. So this has to be a very conscious surrender. Mother speaks of it as a progressive surrender. It does not happen in a day. It's a constant, continuous, active, conscious, spontaneous self-giving, not a tamasic surrender, not a passive surrender. So that's what the inner yajna that Sri Aurobindo and Mother speak of in integral yoga. So in terms of the practice, what does that mean for us? Now, in the Vedic times, or even today where they do the traditional ritualistic yajna, there is a very elaborate yajna Vedi that is created, that is constructed, on which this ritual is performed. In integral yoga, in the inner yajna, the sadhak himself or herself is the altar, the living Vedi on which the divine force is going to work. And in this inner fire of aspiration, the awakening of the psychic entity within, that is the work of the Agni, the aspiration. And one of the main practices Mother and Sri Aurobindo give is the practice of constant remembrance of the divine and constant offering of every movement within, every thought, every feeling, every action into this inner fire, the inner Agni, and turning our whole life into a conscious sacrifice. In the traditional ritualistic yajna, another important component is the mantra, the hymn, the mantra that the rishi, with which the rishi invokes. In integral yoga, also we can use mantras that Sri Aurobindo and Mother have given us. We know some of these mantras. There is the mantra of the mother, Om Anandamayi, Chaitanyamayi, Satyamayi, Parame. There is a beautiful story as to when Sri Aurobindo gave this mantra to which disciple. Then there is also the mantra of Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Aurobindai. Reading mother's own prayers, mother's prayers and meditations. Each prayer can become our mantra as our way to connect to the, open ourselves to the divine force, the descending, the involutionary sacrifice that is happening. Savitri, of course, Mother and Sri Aurobindo, Mother has spoken of, it's the mantra of the transformation. But the best mantra is Mother's name itself. So calling her, remembering her constantly, that again can be one of our aids, one of our mantras, very important mantras in this inner yajna that we will be, that we are expected to constantly do in integral yoga. So I want to close with those lines from which the second part of the title of my talk comes, which are, these are very beautiful lines in Savitri and very long section. But I'm just going to share these last 4 lines. What is this mutual debt that, which from where I've taken the second part of the title? Or maybe I should read just first few more lines before this, because then it makes more sense. Yeah, this is what Sri Aurobindo writes. The involutionary sacrifice, how divine is the supreme is in every part of the being, in every part of existence. The absolute, the perfect, the immune, one who is in us as our secret self. Our mask of imperfection has assumed, that absolute perfect has assumed a mask of imperfection. He has made this tenement of flesh his own, his image in the human measure cast, that to his divine measure we must rise. Then in a figure of divinity, the Maker shall recast us and impose a plan of Godhead on the mortal's mold, lifting our finite minds to his infinite, touching the moment with eternity. That is the sacrifice, the offering of the divine. This transfiguration is earth's due to heaven. This is a very important line. I'm sorry, I should have put this in the slide. This transfiguration is earth's due to heaven. A mutual debt binds man to the supreme. His nature we must put on as he put ours. The supreme has put on the earthly human nature and we have to put on his nature. We are sons of God and must be even as he. His human portion, we must grow divine. So this idea of mutual sacrifice is emphasized right here, because the divine has chosen to stoop down to the plane of ignorance to sow the possibility, or to sow the seed of transformation, to sow the seed of rediscovery and reuniting with the one spirit. That portion we must grow divine. Not just grow divine, we must put on the divine nature. And that's the difference between integral yoga and the old paths of yoga, that there the culmination was uniting with the divine. Here we also have to grow into divine nature, which means transformation of our human nature into the divine's nature. So our life is a paradox with God for key. So I'll stop here, and thank you for listening. And please, if there's any comment or question, I'll stop sharing this part here.
Thank you so much, Beloo ma'am, for this beautiful, insightful session. Thank you. participants. If anyone has a question or if you have any sharings, you can simply unmute yourself and speak up, or you can share your messages in the chat box and I can read it out. Please go ahead.
Um, Thank you, Velu ma'am, for this lovely, insightful talk. Um, my question is, ma'am, can you just explain with an example? Our life is paradox for God as the key.
Yeah, very, very good question. Our life is a paradox with God for key. Um, I think even the most rational mind or the most agnostic person sometimes would fail to explain why certain things happen, and things that we might have planned in a certain way don't go in that expected direction, and a possibility that hasn't even come to our mind that materializes, right? So how does that happen? Is there some divine wisdom that is acting behind, uh, which we cannot access unless we surrender to that divine wisdom, unless we rise enough in consciousness to, we cannot mentally, intellectually understand the working of those divine forces, but perceive somehow in our, at the level of the soul. The requirement, of course, will that be that we are in touch with the soul. We are aware of the soul. When that is not there, as long as that is not there, we have to have that unflinching trust and faith in that higher force which is arranging things. It does not mean that there is no room for or there is no room for personal effort. But the personal effort has to be also done in the spirit of a sacrifice, of a self-giving, that I'm doing this and then letting go, offering it to the mother so that she can arrange whatever the outcome is supposed to be of that action. So things make sense only when we put sort of God in the picture. I will give another example. I don't know how many of you have seen that movie Oppenheimer, about that scientist, the atomic bomb scientist. I'll just speak from the level of the movie that came out, I think, last year or 2, 3 years ago. But if you have seen it, or even if you haven't, I'll just briefly tell. There is a beautiful portrayal of the dilemma that arises, the conflict that arises in this scientist's higher inner mind, that he has created this. He has invented this bomb, and the bomb has been used twice now. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings have happened. And then he starts getting this sense of what has he done? Was it part of his dharma as a scientist? Even before that, he has questionings happening. But afterward, he's very torn with this idea. So there is a paradox of what was his dharma as a scientist, or what does that mean now that he has seen so much destruction that this invention can bring about? And there is this constant self-doubt, constant self-criticism that he's going through, a lot of torture, a lot of genuine pain. And as I was watching this, I just kept thinking of Arjun and Krishna at the Kurukshetra. I just felt, if only this kind of conflict, this kind of torture, self-torture that this character is going through, if only he had his Krishna, that light, his Krishna's wisdom could have shown him that how to reconcile this thing that has happened, with that he's been chosen as an instrument for. So that's the key that was missing. He did not have that key. He kept torturing himself. He kept running from one governmental office to another to, stop further research, that now that we have the atomic bomb, we need not go into hydrogen bomb and things like that. So much stuff that he was doing. He was giving interviews which they were not publishing, all that conflict, except that he did not have the Krishna's light and wisdom. So that's another example that I can think of, that the paradox comes up. If, and we can stay in that paradox as long as we don't find God, the key, which can help resolve this. I hope that helps. I don't know who was asking that question. I think we just...
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, there's a question in the chat box. What is the mantra for mother? Please guide how to chant.
Yeah, okay. This, the mantra that I was referring to was Om Anandamayi Chaitanyamayi Satyamayi Parame. So many of us Indians are familiar with the term Satchidanand, right? Sat, Chit, Anand. The triune, that is one. Sat, the existence, Chit, consciousness, and Ananda, the bliss. In the mantra that Sri Aurobindo has given, he has in a way reversed the order. And it's a mantra invoking the Divine Mother, who is all blissful, Anandamayi, who is all consciousness. And consciousness always means there is a tapas, there is a will also. So it's chit tapas. So who is all consciousness, Chaitanyamayi, and who is all truth, Satyamayi, supreme, Parame. So different people have sung it differently, but use it as a way to kind of concentrate on the mother's presence, to invoke mother's presence, to call her as part of our practice. So in India, mantra jap is a very common practice for concentration. People do it outwardly also, and ideally, it is also something that should happen constantly within, quietly, silently within. So you can go on YouTube and look at various different versions on which people have sung it. I happen to, at BhāratShakti, we work a lot with a couple of schools. And most of the times when we are working with young children, we always start our sessions with some sort of a chanting. And with the young children, this particular school that we've been working with for the last 3-4 years now, all children have learned this, and they actually look forward to when we go next year. So they will say, okay, are we going to chant Anandamayi, Chaitanyamayi? And they've come up with a game where they divide themselves into two teams or two groups. So one group says, Om Anandamayi. So Om, we do it all together. And then one group says, Anandamayi, Chaitanyamayi, and they sing it in a little faster tune, because children can't, you can't expect children to sit silently and do this. So they'll say, Anandamayi, Chaitanyamayi. The other group will say, Satyamayi, Parame. But of course, then we slowly, after 10, 15, 20 times we chanting, we bring it slow down, come to a place of silence, things like that. So it depends on how you use the mantra. So there are very different, Jagjit Singh has sung, and Asha Bhosle has sung, many ashram artists, ashram musicians have also sung Joy. You can find many different versions available on YouTube. Just start following any of the tunes.
Thank you, ma'am. We have some. Jayashri ji, please go ahead.
Yes, my name is Jayashri, and I wanted to thank Beloo ji for such an enlightening talk. The couple of points stood out for me. I'm familiar with the Vedas in a little sense, very small, not to say I'm familiar, I'm not. Trying to still attend some of the classes and understand. But I thought that this point about aspiration, rejection, and surrender made it so clear about sacrifice. This is something that I had not seen, the connection. So thank you so much, because we talk so much about aspiration, rejection, and surrender, as the key principles of integral yoga. But today you brought new light to it by linking it to the sacrifice. So thank you.
Thank you.
And the second point I wanted to thank you for was the story of Oppenheimer. I've seen the movie and I know exactly what you mean, but I really liked your connecting it with Mahabharata and Krishna and Arjuna's conversation. The Gita is a book that I study. And the saying, our life is a paradox with God for key, suddenly assumed a very deep and new meaning. Like everything in Savitri always reveals something deeper and beautiful for our own understanding. So I really wanted to thank you, Beluji. It was a very, very inspiring talk. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm very happy. Thank you.
Participants, does anyone else want to ask or share anything?
This is Ranjit from Kolkata. Yes, I want to add something here. From the Vedic perspective, that when the creation happened, Om Ritancha Satyancha Vidat Tapaso Jayata, Tato Ratro Jayata. That was the Ratri Sukta of Rig Veda. Now, it has went into the darkness, and in the darkness, Supreme was there. And from the Supreme, the creation is going toward upwards, which is the Supreme descended there. And what Deluji mentioned regarding Lolita's name, I am quoting 3 lines only from the Savitri in the page number 538, book 7, canto 6. I am reading 3 lines. Here also the mention of the bride is there. Her seeing is her sight, her walk is steps of power, and life is filled with spiritual joy, and matter is the spirit's willing bride. Sri Aurobindo mentioned in the book 7, canto 6, where she has also mentioned. And creation happened, there was, Sri Aurobindo also told us, of Proketam Salila. That is the dark part of the universe, creation. From the dark universe is going towards the superconscious one. And in between, our journey consists of. And Supreme was behind the darkness, and Mother has sacrificed herself, just like Virata Purusha, the 3 upper hemisphere and 3 lower hemisphere. Mother is the bridge, golden bridge, in the Virata. That is one. Otherwise, Beluji has done a wonderful work today and clarified for Gita means clarified butter, which increasing our aspiration towards God. This is when we are giving the butter, it increases the light, and light's characteristic is go upward. Our aspiration is going upward to meet the Supreme, from the earth to the superconscious. That is what. Otherwise, we have wonderfully clarified all these things within the short period of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for sharing those lines from Savitri. Beautiful. And Mother has at many places spoken of this idea of sacrifice of the Divine Mother also. And she's told this in the form of a story also, how the ray of love comes down as there is a cry from below. Again, we connected to the very first idea that Sri Aurobindo gives us in the book, The Mother, aspiration from below, aspiration from inconscience that rises, and the Supreme responds in the form of that ray of love so that the creation can begin. Because the 4 initial emanations, the asuras, have created a chaos there. And then mother has spoken about her own experience of how, I think if I remember it correctly, she said maybe for 2 or 3 hours, she stayed in that consciousness that she was at the origin, the love from which everything originated, from which everything comes about. So it's a very concrete experience that she has spoken of the self-giving of the Divine Mother.
Thanks, ma'am. Participants, anyone else?
I would like to just add to Beluji's explanation, just adding only are support words. Sri Aurobindo's 2 books, they explain Secret on Veda and in the Hymns to Mystic Fire. The first chapter, first mantra that he takes is Agni Mile Purohitam, the first mandala of the Rig Veda, Madhuchandas, Vishwamitra. So there itself it is very well explained, and there is another book called Essays in Vedic Interpretation by Sri Aurobindo, where the etymology, the symbolic spiritual meanings are given. Recently, me and Beloo had a chat about that book also. It is in the volume 14th of the CWSA books. Vedic interpretation, essays in Vedic interpretation that was written before the Secret on Veda and before the Hymns to Mystic Fire. She can share with you. And recently, a little bit study here and there with the Sanskrit teachers. So the Sanskrit words, language learning, have are all nouns. They don't have a noun, proper noun, just generated like that. They have everything as a verbal noun. Dhatu Rupena Sanya, they call it in the Panini's Ashtadhyayani. So Agni, you have, the Sri Aurobindo has gone to the original meaning of the Agni from the Ag Dhatu, like Gau Dhatu, and then they have the external meanings. And recently what has happened since few hundreds of years is that we lost the inner spiritual symbolism and only going by the outer meaning. Gau means cow. Gau has also another root meaning. So if we read Sri Aurobindo's explanation and also the greatest books that have been explained, additional explaining Sri Aurobindo's explanation to Sanskrit in the Sanskrit manner are Kapala Shastri's books. Kapala Shastri, no Vedic interpretation. He wrote Sanskrit words with the meaning and all. So he was one of the earliest devotees of Sri Aurobindo. And I'm really thankful to Beluji. She has simplified it and made it accessible to all. The Vedic interpretation, the spiritual symbolism, which is too deep a subject, but she is making it. And really thank you, Beluji, to make it understandable, comprehensible, even to those who are not even made an entry into Sanskrit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Baladi, for adding that very important point. Yeah, in the interest of the time, I didn't go into it. In fact, just one thing I would like to mention. You were absolutely right to bring out the idea of Agni, why Agni, the leader, from the etymological sense of Sanskrit. Even the word Yajña, Sri Aurobindo has done a beautiful analysis of that word with the root ya and ja. What does that mean? And there is one of the senses in which is also a meaning of giving oneself lovingly, adoring. So it's not some sort of a forced giving. It is out of love that the sacrifice is done. The divine sacrifices itself. So that when I read that, it was just very beautiful. And it made so much sense then why Mother and Sri Aurobindo insist on a joyous self-giving, because it has to be done in the spirit of love, in the spirit of adoration of the divine. Divine loves its creatures, so divine sacrifices itself. We, in our love for the divine, should be spontaneously willing to offer everything that we have from the divine to divine. So that part was very beautiful when I understood that. So thank you for reminding Baladi of that part. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. So there's a quick query in the chat box. If you can recommend any specific book of the mother for reading.
Book of mother, I mean, Sri Aurobindo's book, The Mother, or the book written by the mother, Mother's Conversations. You can start with prayers and meditations. You can also start with her 1929 to 1931 conversations, where a lot of very in very simple way, she explains the process of yoga. Most of her books are in the form of question and answer, her correspondence. What Baladi and I, we are part of a study group. We are currently reading Mother's Volume 10, the classes she used to take of explaining or giving simple, answers to queries that come based on Sri Aurobindo's thoughts and aphorisms. That's Mother's Volume 10. So it depends on what you are seeking. If you're coming more from an education perspective, certainly Volume 12. But the 3 volumes of Words of the Mother, 1, 2, 3, they are also very simple, short mantra, sutra type things that you can get. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. Dr. Bijlani, sir, I request you to share your thoughts, please.
Thank you, Beloo, for simplifying this extremely complex subject, because the symbolism of the Vedas is not easy to understand, and Sri Aurobindo has unraveled it and has also gone into the roots of the Sanskrit language the way it was in the Vedic times. To be able to do that and to bring it on a platform for the general public is not easy. And you've done an admirable job. Since I myself I'm not really well versed with this aspect of Sri Aurobindo's writings, all I can do is to stick to some generalizations. And since I'm in the position of just making some closing comments, I can get away with that. So all I would say is that sacrifice essentially is a concept of recycling. And it's very easy to understand because if we are able to give something, or if we give something, which should be in fact willingly and done and cheerfully done. And if it is not done willingly and cheerfully, then of course Sri Aurobindo has warned us that it will be extracted by nature, which means that there's no getting away from giving. And if we just remember that we are able to give only because we have received. So we are able to give because we have received. And if we have received it from another person, then that person could give because that person received. And therefore, if we keep tracing back, the ultimate giver is the divine. And if the ultimate giver is the divine itself has made the biggest sacrifice. And sacrifice in the sense of self-limitation. Just imagine the all-knowing, all-powerful divine putting on the mask of inconscient matter, which seems to know nothing and can do nothing. And then starting this game of gradual evolution, revealing itself bit by bit in various forms. At the first leap from matter to life, and the second one from life to mind, and the third leap is Sri Aurobindo's mother have assured us round the corner, from the mental to the supramental. So the divine itself is the ultimate giver and has made the supreme sacrifice of putting on this mask, putting on this appearance of limitation, of starting with the matter, inconscient matter, which seems to know nothing and can do nothing. So if we just remember that, then whatever sacrifice we make or whatever we give will not really seem like giving. It will be, as you said, an expression of love. And that love will express itself through gratitude for what we have received from the ultimate giver. So that is sort of an important reminder in life. And the whole thing is summed up in many lines in Savitri, and you, by relating the secret of the Veda with Savitri, you in a way sort of made it doubly precious. So thank you very much for this deep understanding that you have of Sri Aurobindo's writings and making it intelligible to the general public, including people like me who also, for whom also this subject has been one of the most difficult subjects to handle. But you made it so simple. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say that I am also a student. I'm not as, certainly I don't come from a Sanskrit background. I've just studied a little bit of it, but I've been exploring, studying Vedic writing. So it's been really connecting it, as you're saying, connecting it with Mother Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga. In a way, they have. So last week's session was on, making sense of Sanatana Dharma, making sense of Hinduism. That's why I requested Arunima to do it today, because in a way, what Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga does is if I can just say it very simply, he modernizes some of the old cumbersome terminologies of living tradition that Sanatana Dharma is. So the yajna, the Vedic yajna, all these things. So he's just made it so because he's talking about today's mentality and future's mentality. So he's taken everything in that symbolic inner say. So connecting the two has been my process of going deeper into the study. I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to share a few thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Really grateful.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Bijlani, sir. So, before we close today's session, let me inform that the recording of today's session and all the Yes Talks that we have every Saturday evening are published on our YouTube channel, Yes Spirituality. I have shared the link to the channel in the chat box also. You can visit the channel and explore extensive content on yoga, education, spirituality, and related subjects like self-help, psychology, and wellness. Beloo ma'am, thank you so much once again for sharing your wisdom and valuable time with all of us.
Thank you. Thank you. There was one question somebody had in the chat box. I don't know if it is a question for you, Arunima, or something about satsang, Monday to Friday. Can you just
So on the Yes platform, we have the online talks only on Saturdays at 8 p.m. IST. And I'm not sure, Beloo ma'am, if you or your team conducts any.
So we have the satsangs. The one I mentioned is on Friday evenings, where we are currently reading Mother's Volume 10. So if somebody is interested in joining, just maybe I can share my email. They can just correspond to me on email. I'll just put it in the chat box. So you can just email me and I'll put you in that group. Yeah. So you can just email me, Sangeet Ji, I think. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Ma'am, thank you, participants, for being with us today. We close today's session now with a moment of peaceful silence. Namaste.
Yes.